like 6 years giving yourself to a program that you've curated is like literally an extension of yourself. And I am very much so like available for questions and texts and emails and whatever, which is probably the hardest balance of itself. Like the balance of physically being there is one thing, but the balance of like putting it away. Because like I even think, Florence was born December 9th. December is literally our busiest season of the year, and we just had a program open. I was like, I'm sure if you asked her, it was probably like 2.5 weeks of the 4 that I was like trying to turn off my brain. But it just doesn't work that way for a lot of people.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Decoding Cocktails podcast. I'm your host, Chris LeBeau. At the ripe age of 38, I left my former career behind and joined the hospitality industry. Since then, I've been on a rapid journey of learning, meeting all sorts of great people, and this podcast is my chance to bring you along with me, whether I'm interviewing somebody that works in the industry, another enthusiast, or occasionally stepping back to share what I'm working on or my thoughts. I'm so glad you're here, and so with that aside, let's get into today's episode. What's happening, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of the Decoding Cocktails podcast. I am Chris LeBeau. Today we have my good friend and cocktail brother from another mother, Marshall Minaya. While we're a little more than a week delayed here, the purpose of our sitting down for this conversation has a bit of a nod to Father's Day. Marshall is a lifelong hospitality industry guy who has worked hard across all positions that you can imagine, to where he now manages 3 programs in Midtown Manhattan, but it's his latest role of becoming a dad, which is why we sat down for this conversation. There's a big ongoing conversation in general today about things like maternity and paternity leave, more nationally, work-life balance, all this jazz. But I think it is fair to say that in many cases, it is probably discussed even less in the hospitality industry because of how punishing the hours are. And while we're beginning to see the lens change on things a bit, we've long been ingrained with the idea that restaurants and bars are places that you work while you're figuring your life out rather than being a destination, rather than being a profession. But as jobs in the restaurant world are increasingly dignified, I think about someone telling their child, a child telling their parent today, I want to be a chef, versus someone saying that 30 years ago. I think that certainly would have put a lot more trepidation in a lot of parents' minds. Like, oh my God, like a chef, that's such like an undesirable job, versus now it is seen as a cooler, sexier profession. We recorded this conversation at Bar Convent, Brooklyn this year. And as you'll hear Marshall allude to, he told me actually last year, right during the same convention, that he was going to be a dad in the first place. And fast forward to this year, he now has 6 whole months of experience in this job. And I wanted to talk to him about how it is going, because I think it's important for conversations like this to be out in the open. If you work at a restaurant or bar, how do you navigate these things and still stay in the industry if that is where you want to be? Marshall is quick to say that he asked plenty of parents in the industry for advice and why it's hard, even when he is at home or at the office, to be fully there. And as you hear him talk about this, I'm sure you'll be able to relate in your own life, regardless of whether you're a parent or not. Marshall kind of wrestles with things like, how does he begin to let go of things that he would have just reflexively done in the past, and not just let himself be, quote unquote, the plug, as he puts it, as problems arise. He has a team that he's worked hard to build, and that, along with his team at home, aka his wife, Allie, is in part how he has made this leap. And as he'll say during this podcast, yes, he is definitely tired, but he was already tired because the long hours have always been there. He also has to accept the fact that by being at the bar less, there are new employees that are simply just not going to know him as well. because that's just how it goes as we have to more divvy up our time amongst things. You can find Marshall on Instagram at Marshall Vincent, and his 3 programs in Midtown are Valerie, Madam George, and Lolita, and there are links to all of them in the show notes. In addition to, I think, this being actually a great human conversation, I also just need to say to my dear friend, I am so grateful that this crazy podcast brought us together a couple years ago. You're a great human. I'm lucky to know you. Enjoy this conversation, everybody.
Do I look okay? This is filmed, right?
You look beautiful. You look like a guy who hasn't been up since 5 a.m, BSing or taking care of a kid. So the first thing, obviously, to cover today is I think it's just hilarious how once upon a time I started a stupid freaking podcast and was talking to plenty of great distillers and bartenders from around the greater St. Louis area. And then obviously you and I got hooked up and have obviously just stayed friends. So that's always so cool. It's fun. It's like when I go to out of town stuff, I'm like, okay, get to hang with Marshall and we'll see what else the hell I do in the process of it. So to the part of our conversation today, when we first started talking, you were running Valerie and getting ready to open Madam George, your second concept. You had not opened yet. You were kind of planning out the menu. And now you have 3 concepts. And as if that's not enough, now have a little kid in the picture. So, we're just going to let this conversation roll where it is. But when you think about, I'm going to start over. This feels, I feel like I'm too much of a wind up microphone. When you think about kind of I guess the place would be fun to start is, what are some of the lessons you've learned about how do you be present at home and at work? How have you kind of tried to manage those two in terms of these 2 different lives that obviously pull so much on your calendar at this point?
That is a very good question. I think I manage by being with somebody that helps me manage, both work and life. You know what I mean? Having a partner that was in the industry for a long time and is effectively still in the hospitality industry by being a barber. I think if I was just rolling around by myself and having somebody else help, I don't think it would be going as well. I think having a very open line of communication and being open to listening to her is very helpful. But honestly, it's so easy when it comes to dealing with anything pertaining to baby Florence, because it's just the best part of it, And it's funny because being here last year is the first time that at BCB is the first time that I mentioned it to anybody. I was talking to a couple people, and at this point we were maybe 4 months out from finding out that Allie was pregnant, and I hadn't really spoken to anybody about it. And we sat down for a drink at the now closed Quarter Bar, but and we discussed it. And so it's funny coming around a year later, and now she's born and she's just turned 6 months old, and it is fun and familiar coming back here and thinking about it now, because it was very different, but managing the work-life balance is a day-to-day interaction and experience, and having a bit of a consistent schedule with that, and having the opportunity where I've been with these programs now since 2018. I think I'm on 6 years officially since I started on the Valerie project, which is something I never thought I would say, that I've worked for somewhere for 6 years.
Yeah.
But having the opportunity now that I've curated these programs, created these programs, I've hired the staff, I've trained the staff, I Like my teams at all three programs are incredibly helpful. And now we have people in places that are head bartenders and able to, I trust to like, tell me when something is wrong, tell me when something is great. Makes it all very helpful.
So one of the things that I'm always convinced is a farce, yet I know to be true, is like your team loves you and you love them. Do you, I don't think there's a right answer to this question, but how do you view kind of that work family thing? Like, is this, hey, we're family, or like, hey, like we need to keep some level of professional bounds around it? How do you view that in terms of the way you approach it? Because there's not a way, but what's your way? Because it seems like, again, your people are in good sync with you.
I think it's funny because like I've been working in this industry in New York City since 2012, and I've been running programs since 2016, 2015, and like I've hired people that are my friends first. I've hired people that I bartended next to, and then I started running a program, and like I've hired them to work at my bar. Including my now wife. And it's much more difficult to manage them for me, like, because to have those conversations of like, this is the order in which you build. I see why you're building that way, but in fact, we're going to start building this way. Or I would like your shake to be like X. So let's start transitioning into getting more aeration, shaking this way. But they're like, they were bartending right next to me, So I think with the majority of my staff, redo. With the majority of my teams, they were strangers when I hired them, and I've developed relationships with them outside of that. But the whole goal of the relationship is just to help them be, more interested in their jobs as bartenders and more interested in the industry as bartenders and head bartenders and progressing in that fashion. But like every single interview, the same response comes out of my mouth. That is, I can teach you to bartend, but I cannot teach you to care. So if you come to work every day and you care and you give it your all and you give me, a little bit of yourself, then like you can be the best bartender that you can be. And I hope that people care a little bit more than they did walking in the door, because they see how much I care, but like the passion has to be there and the drive has to be there to give yourself a little bit to this industry. Because we all know that this industry is intoxicating, enthralling, demanding, exhausting, demoralizing, any adjective that we could think of. But if you give a little bit, you can get a lot out.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I know in terms of things you did not have control over that you totally recommend would be opening a bar program like immediately. I forget if it was before or after. Like, I mean, it's like, Lolita opens, Florence is born. I forget in which order. But
yeah,
so obviously
that's the order.
just chaos. And so there's obviously, you were working a ton to try to get, Lolita in place.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Carlos has kind of picked up and ran with the ball from there at that point. But one of the things I remember us talking about casually at some point afterward is when you think about suddenly now don't have nearly as much free time in a wonderful way, getting to hang out with her. But when suddenly you had to begin to better diverge your time between work and home, what bumps did you run into with staff in terms of like, hey, we don't see you around as much anymore? And like, how have you tried to navigate that along the way?
I think that's like a really hard part about it, because obviously the sole opinion I mostly care about is my wife and now Florence's opinion. Care about Winston's opinion too, but he's happier sitting on the couch than anything. But yeah, that was a tough one, because coming back after I took 4 weeks off, coming back from that, it was like I was easing in, and again, that's what I was saying with being with the company for 6 years, having the trust to build Valerie from the ground up, and then opened Madame George with even more trust, and then Lolita with even more trust. And I think being able to like build my own schedule in that way, and like being able to work the days that I'm there and then I can't be there, and work around our family schedule. Coming back after the 4 weeks was exciting, and I was so happy to see everybody, and it was my first time like not being with my wife and Florence, and yeah, it was like nice, but it was all very short. You know what I mean? Like I was able to really ease into it, which was helpful. Dealing with what I definitely see, and I get from people is like, oh, well, like you're not here as much because like I was there a lot. Bouncing around all three programs, hopping behind the bar when needed to be. I was just kind of like the plug. You know what I mean? Anytime there was a leak, I was there to, fix a glass washer, fix a tin rinser, open up some cases, stock shelves, work a service bar shift, whatever it might be. You know what I mean? But there is definitely a feeling that I have of like, I can see that the team misses me or misses my presence, or, there's like, servers or support staff that start and they're like, I'm so-and-so, sorry, who are you? And I'm like, oh, right. I'm Marshall. I'm around,
Yep.
If you ever need anything. But it is just kind of like leaning into trusting the people that I've been working with for a long time, and people that have been with the programs for a long time that truly care, and trusting that they're going to be there to answer questions and be helpful and let me know when anything is going wrong. And, knock wood, I haven't had to like really run in on a day off with the family to kind of hop into the bar. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not distracted often, which
Sure.
is if Allie was sitting here next to me, that would kind of be the biggest point is I think like being available is a positive and a negative, strong negative at sometimes, but like 6 years giving yourself to a program that you've curated is like literally an extension of yourself. And I am very much so like available for questions and texts and emails and whatever, which is probably the hardest balance of itself. Like the balance of physically being there is one thing, but the balance of like putting it away. Cause like I even think, Florence was born December 9th. December is literally our busiest season of the year. And we just had a program open. I was like, I'm sure if you asked her, it was probably like 2.5 weeks of the 4 that I was like trying to turn off my brain, but it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
It doesn't.
And a lot of people in this industry too. It's easy to just kind of keep it going and always thinking about cocktails and menus and staff and reading emails and how, your suggestions and things that you can kind of improve and all those things. So I would say that would be, I don't even remember where this question started, but I think that's the biggest struggle is balancing the act of availability, like at home versus being there, just like on our phones. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think. My friend James, he runs a company, totally different industry, but he there was a point in time when he began to reach a certain like altitude when he was saying, I'm the car has been in 5th gear for so long that it took me, months to actually begin to figure out to learn how to downshift in that regard. And I think that's hard because it's like my friend Tim runs programs in St. Louis. It's like when someone calls in and there's suddenly not somebody to work on the line in the kitchen, guess who's working the line? Because you're the owner, right?
Yeah.
But I do think it's probably one of those lessons as well for myself as like my business grows up a bit is, and there's a little extra, there's $5 extra laying around here and there. It's like, what of these problems that I have, so-called, could I automate delegate out, etc., as opposed to feeling like I have to do everything, unpack boxes, whatever. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do those, but how do we begin to avail ourselves more of that? Because there's probably a point in time when we are giving too much of ourselves to a program.
Yeah, and I think I think that's why this industry can be so enthralling and intoxicating is like, I mean, we read every day an article, an Instagram post, whatever, about like literally numerically listing these bars, saying that like this bar is better than the rest, when the people that are choosing these haven't been to all the bars in the world or in an area, but also, they know specific people in these bars, and it just kind of rolls on from there, right?
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you give a lot, and I think every head bartender, beverage director, bartender, bar manager that cares gives more than themselves to these programs because they want them to succeed. The bar industry is not one that will just exist because you're there. You know what I mean? Like you have to be the one that's there caring more than ever. Somebody has to, and I'm fortunate. I work with partners that really care a lot too. And that makes it very helpful. And like the management team that we hire cares a lot too. But I hope to a certain extent, some of that comes from the work that I've been doing over the last 6 years. But yeah, in order to, it's kind of like if you talk to people that go on a week-long vacation, right? It's like, how much of that week were you truly present? Because like you're still, like especially in this industry, is like I closed the bar at 3, got home at 3:30 or whatever, and then woke up and went on a flight a few hours later, and I'm still, my body hasn't even calmed down yet. My brain certainly hasn't calmed down yet. And you're just kind of like riding that high, and then it's like 3-4 days later, and then you're like finally enjoying the vacation, and then it's time to go home.
Time to go back. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's I think paternity leave was partly that, and I think like the days off are partly like that, and I think that's the biggest struggle, because like I feel and I hope, it's like I get home and I'm just like kind of, I'm gonna pick her up, I'm gonna kiss everybody, and and we're gonna kind of go into that parenting mode and relationship mode and family mode. But yeah, I mean, your brain doesn't really stop. I'm also one of those people that really enjoys this industry and building cocktails specifically, and I could see an ingredient and my brain is lost on how can we turn this into a
Yes.
Yeah.
I do think that is part of what's the tricky part of when you love the work too, or there's aspects of things, or your brain gets off on a certain thing. It's like it's hard to suddenly not taste something, see something, and suddenly be at work in your own little way or whatever. And so I think that's one of the tricky things. A tangent, one of the things I've begun to wonder about too. You sent me into this bar, the Black Crescent, while I was here in town. And one of the things I couldn't help but think about while I was there, in a place that felt very, if you walk past any of the IT bars that night, if they weren't already crazy all the time, they're insanely crazy right now. And I guess I found myself wondering as I sat there, being taken care of by Reynolds, was when it comes to like cultivating regulars and really building relationships with like a team, or not with a team, but with your guests, when you are in it spot and like it's just this churn of just people who want to come and see the thing, it makes you wonder how hard it is to actually to preserve that in there when you're just used to performing for people who are coming in from all over the country, all over the world, all the time. Like, how do you preserve that?
I think I'd imagine, I got you. I'm not there. I'd imagine that it would be incredibly exhausting. I think the biggest caveats or difficulty of the industry is expectations.
Yep.
If you're one of the people, one of the bars, one of the places, one of the experiences that other industry people really seek out, like if they're visiting or whatever. The expectation to give a lot is really there. And I'd imagine that would be really difficult.
Yep.
I know from my own perspective as a beverage director and someone that cares a lot about running profitable programs, because first and foremost, these bars must, we have a 15-year lease.
Yeah.
You got to stay open, and I think one of the most important things that, like Southern Teague has said, is that, the customers are in the business of spending money and I'm in the business of making it. And I think when you're in these programs, it's like a lot of giving and not a lot of receiving. And maybe make it off of the quote unquote, normal clientele when the industry people come in and the industry people seek it out. But I think it's really easy to kind of get in a habit of just kind of like really excited to see other people, and you're just pouring and pouring and pouring. You're not paying attention. So I'd imagine to be one of those like it programs is really difficult. Also, in our world now, it's like to be seen and to be heard and people to really experience it. What you have to do is travel, and takeover after takeover, and that just pulls you further and further away from your program and your bar. And
Yep.
I think that's very interesting. Like I know for a fact a bar in Mexico City that opened and did like 30 to 50 pop-ups in that year, and then I think, who's at the bar? How do you manage both? And I guess if that's the conversation we're having, I think that would be a very difficult one.
And obviously you have cultivated this on a more micro level with 3 programs, but I do find it interesting to often like study the actual food industry, since that movement is 25, 30 years ahead of cocktails. And I was listening to a book by a gal, Our Lady of Perpetual Hunger was the name of the book, but she talked about how at some point she had ended up inside of like a seemingly quaint looking, but like really like food corporation at that point that owned all these like notable restaurants. And that there was an expectation that you were okay with traveling, and that the caliber of the food wasn't as important anymore. And this doesn't mean that for people who are popping up that is all true, but I remember I heard a TED Talk once, which can be full of also things that are not true. But this guy basically said, you'll never win the award for Father of the Year and Employee of the Year in the same year.
Right.
And so one, I'm letting you know this. No, but more importantly, I think it's that, if you want your bar to be great, it's like with a lot of the incredible like Japanese restaurants. It's like they've been working on the same freaking cocktail for 12 years, for 20 years. And so I think the problem is the question of what game do we want to play? Do you want to play I've got 7 bars, or I'm, and there's none of them is wrong, but and to realize that we can easily take our eye off the ball.
Yeah.
Because we're never at X.
And that's the huge advantage I have for the programs is they're all in the same building. Literally 45 West 45th Street is the address for all 3 bars. So it's funny because I'm the first to be like, no, I want to go to the West Village. I want to be in the East Village, Lower East Side, where these other happening bars are located. And more importantly, whether like other bars are there, also like it's just more my speed.
Yep. More
people that like I communicate well with and I bond with, and I think would be really a good time. But we're in the same building, so like I can literally get from one bar to the other in a matter of a minute or less, and I think that's hugely beneficial, to not like quote unquote taking our eye off the prize or off the ball. But I'd imagine these ones, like we were just discussing, a friend of a friend or in St. Louis that's opening a new program in Oaxaca, and that would be very difficult. But like we all bar owners and bar managers all know, like you don't make money off of one bar. It just doesn't happen.
Yep.
Like if you have plenty or multiple or more, then you can start turning small profits into marginal profits into greater profits, and that's how you become successful. Like the whole concept of franchise, if you will, right? Like you're growing, you're expanding, you're getting people, more people to your product, which is what I do love about like the bar takeover conversation. I think it's great, and I think that's why everybody loves it, and I think that's why people turn out for it. But it's difficult the more you're away from your program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just for the sake of it, having just done one recently, tell us a little bit about what's the experience like in terms of, you've obviously hosted them before, but going to Italy for that, tell us what that's like. And obviously there's always what you think is going to happen and what does, and you don't have to get into anything you do or don't want to, but I guess I'm curious, what are your thoughts on what it's like to be a part of that?
I was fortunate that like the takeovers I was doing was part of like a group of bartenders, which kind of eased it in a little bit. It's like not so much people that were like seeking out Marshall or seeking out Valerie. It was like people that were like there, and there might have been another bar, or maybe they were there. I don't know. But I think being a part of a group was really nice, and being able to represent Valerie and the programs in another country, even let alone another state, in another country was pretty great. It was really nice, and meeting people from all over the world that were there to bartend next to me was awesome. And being able to kind of talk about the programs. But again, it's like I'm fortunate as bar dad or new bar dad or whatever, but like having the people that are at the programs at home I trust to run them the way that I would, or like, kind of do as I would do. Also the baby came with, so made everything so much easier. Having baby Florence along for the Italy trip, and my wife made a bar takeover in another country just that much better, and being able to not have to like stress about them at home away from me, or whatever it might be, made my my time there more enjoyable.
I'm sure not having them, that like every day is an adventure of fun, and like, oh, I didn't see this coming, being a new dad. But are there any other, as she grows up a little bit, like other, I don't know, ways you see your approach to work changing at all more, or have to take it all one day at a time?
I mean, you have to take it one day at a time. But I think it's just going to get harder and harder. Like the more that she develops a personality. Like in the beginning, it was funny. I was like, man, I can't wait, because how cool will it be? Like she'll be able to like get off school in New York City and like come to the bar and like be picked up, or like go have food, or come hang out with me, or whatever it might be, But I just think as she gets older, just like every day will be harder to get out the door, even, let alone go from Brooklyn to Manhattan. And yeah, I mean, like I never plan on leaving the programs that I run. I hope to be a part of them for as long as they're around. But yeah, definitely like the future conversations have come up with Allie and I, and like to see, like, I think about it a lot. Like, it's like, what would I do as a dad or as a person, like without these bars? Cause like, or not even without these bars, but like without bartending, without this industry, like, or a different facet of this industry, because like, I just love creation so much. And I like to think that there would be something for me to do, but I think it's gonna be really fucking hard. I think like as she gets older, and I don't know if that leads to me being at work more or at work less. Like I'm not sure yet, but I know right now she just turned 6 months, and her personality is like really shining through. I mean, she was at lunch with us the other day, and then at Katana Kitten for some cocktails, and it was super fun. And like having her around while doing the normal things that Allie and I do is like, I feel like if we weren't as comfortable doing that, it would be really hard.
Yeah.
You know, but like we have no issue going to a bar with her and like just bringing her along. And I do really enjoy talking to people in the industry more now, like about stuff like that. And it's like, I don't know if they have any interest in babies or anything like that, but like, I don't really care because like she's coming with, and like we're going to bring her along. And, I feel like the industry has been very open to it though. You know what I mean? Especially being here at Industry City with Bar Convent Brooklyn is like, we live 10 blocks from here and we come here literally every weekend. And, we're at these bars every weekend with her and the dog. And, yeah, I mean, I think everyone's pretty open to it, which really helps ease it out, you know?
People come in, into parenting from all different situations and whatnot, but like, everybody, I usually give guests questions in advance. Marshall and I are doing this one on the fly. But as, like, if someone's if they're gearing up for maybe having a family or whatever, or working in the industry, are there any questions you'd be asking or watch? Like, I mean, because we want, like, how do they be a good parent, make enough money for that kid? Like, are there questions or things you would be thinking about or asking if you were them in terms of hopefully making that transition less hard? Because it's always going to be hard.
Yeah. It's funny because, like I said in the beginning of the chat, was like last year, this time was like the first time I like really started talking to people, and I started picking brains a lot. Like Tim Cooper has been a bar dad for a long time, and I chatted with him for a good half hour or more, and Yanni at Never Sink Gin is a friend, and the same, like, chatted with him for a long time, and specifically asking, like, how the fuck do you do this? Like, and the list could go on. Jake at Isolation Proof, like all these people that are dads in this industry, but there's not a lot of like bartending full-time dads that you could still talk to. And I think I wish that more people talked about it. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I've always found it so much easier for me, probably because I'm not in therapy, but definitely should be. But I just speak to everybody about my shit. You know what I mean? So like, I don't think I could mention anything about this industry or the bars or myself without talking about my wife or Florence or, and I'm just happy that people are like open to listening or dealing with it. But yeah, I mean, I think like as far as like money goes, I'm aware that in New York City, this industry is profitable. And again, having a very open conversation with my partner and my wife and understanding what needs to be done in order to stay afloat, pay rent, keep doing things that we want to do. We're very open about those conversations. And I think that, I think it's beneficial too that like this industry is very easy to get lost in the sense of like you could drink a bit too much, you could kind of go out a bit too much, and I've kind of been out of that for longer than being a dad, so I think that part is helpful. It's like I'm happy to get home on days that I'm able to go in early and get home to them, and we can go get lunch or go get dinner or whatever, or just hang out at home is great. And the nights that I'm at work, I know and I trust that she's got it locked down, and if she needs anything, she's gonna call me. But she gives me a lot of trust and freedom in knowing that like I know I need to like work and continue to thrive in what I'm doing, and then when she goes to work, I have to do the same. Mm-hmm. I do my best to not send any negative anything ever. And same with like when people are like, how you sleeping? The answer is shit, but it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The sleep has been shit for a long time, which is what that's what we always say is like, I'm a bartender by trade and passion, and yeah, you don't sleep very much.
Yeah.
Whatever. Having a baby doesn't really adjust it that much.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
I'm just not sleeping for another reason now.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, we've all done a clopin.
Yeah.
No, I clopin every day. That's great.
Yeah, for me, and I guess like, whether it's people talk about moving, it's a kid, whatever. Yeah, like for me as well. I think it's, as a guy who's single for a long time, it's like, it's just easy to kind of just develop my own routines. Like, again, never drinking a lot, but a little more than I want, staying up a little later than I want. And like, someone comes into the picture in your life and suddenly you have a chance to kind of like revisit some of these things.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, how do we make this work better and be a little kinder to this body right here? So, yeah. Okay, so I think this is a good run for us. You can get back out to BCB if you want, or if you need to bail for the day. But thanks for taking time to chat. I appreciate it.
Thank you, bud.
You bet.
I hope it was something worthwhile.
I think we covered some good ground. I'm happy for it. So
good. We'll check in 6 months.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you'd write us a review on whatever platform you listen on, or share an episode with a friend. The show notes are available at decodingcocktails.com/podcast. Happy cocktailing, everybody.